Alright guys, this is going to be a video on how to start some detail coil bowls using a form. We're going to be using a styrofoam form for this particular bowl. If you're at home and you don't have a styrofoam bowl, you can use a paper bowl approximately the same size. However, it can get a little bit of flimsy on you just because, you know, the clay has moisture in it and the paper might start to soak up some of the moisture. I also have another video on this channel working with a larger form. If you want to go ahead and take a look at that, you can. However, if you're using either a plastic bowl form or a metal bowl form, you're going to want to line it with a plastic bag. If you don't do that, you're not going to be able to pop the bowl, the ceramic bowl, out of the metal or plastic bowl easily. With these, we're going to go in and we're going to tear them or cut it off, and then your bowl will be able to pop out. Now, when transporting it back to the classroom, you'll have this bowl to keep it in really nicely so that it's not going to move around on you too much, and you could transport it a lot easier. So you're going to need a bowl. You're also going to need some fresh clay. You're going to need some slip. I like to make slip in these piping bags in school. You can just take some dried up clay. I usually will let, maybe like a little bit dry up overnight, separate it into a few pieces like this, let it dry, put it on in here, soak some water in it for about 20 minutes, and you should have some nice slip. I'm gonna put a little bit in here, and we're gonna need just a little bit of slip as we're doing these. Now we're going to be working with much smaller coils on these, and this is going to prep you for working with any type of detailed coil work. You're going to want to make sure that you have a nice clear space, clear table to work on, so that even though you're not rolling out a huge coil, you still have that overall space to go from your fingertips to your palms. So I'm going in, I'm not applying a ton of pressure to this, but you want to make these fairly small so that we get a lot of really nice detail. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to attach to the assignment showing you guys a bunch of different demonstrations, but for this one, I'm just going to show you a bunch of different coils that you could make. Now, you want to think of creating some type of radial balance with this. Radial meaning that it starts in the center and it starts to build outwards. And I recommend that you guys really experiment with these. Have some really fun, interesting ideas. So I'm gonna start my very first coil as a small spiral right in the center. I want to make sure that my coil is nice and smooth, and I'm going to just start curling it in. And you want to make sure that you're really attaching this nicely as you go. And if you notice any cracking on it, you can smooth it. You can also go in with like a paintbrush and some water, and that would be fine as well. Now, this is a very, very common shape to use when creating traditional coil pots. However, I really want you guys to experiment with maybe, 4 or 5 different shapes. So when I broke off the form, I'm just smoothing this little bit of extra in here to finish it off so that I have a nice connected piece of clay. And I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna place that as close as I can into the very center of my bowl. All right, so I'm just gonna apply a little bit of pressure, and that's gonna start to flatten it out. I think I'm gonna play around with a few more swirls on the bottom, just to get a nice base. And I'm gonna kind of make them all different sizes, but you want to work with thin coils. So maybe I'll make it a little thinner, and I'll make a bigger one. but because this is something that we're going to be able to eat out of, all of the glazes that we have in class are food safe, so you don't have to worry about that. Once they're sealed and finished and the clay is fully vitrified, which means all of the moisture is out of it and it's turning into ceramics, we will be set to go. Now with this, you are gonna wanna slip and score it a little bit. I'm just gonna go in and score like one side of it, and then I'm just gonna dip it into a little bit of slip, just a very, very little bit, just like that. And then I'm going to attach it onto there, and you don't wanna have a bunch of slip showing. You can go in and you can clean that slip up with your pin tool, with a paintbrush, but you really don't want a ton of it pushing through, because that's just gonna alter your form a little bit, and it's gonna get kind of like mucky looking on the outside, and we wanna have a really nice view of this on the outside. The inside we will eventually be smoothing. But I'm just gonna start off with this. And you wanna make sure that you are compressing these as close to each other as you can. You don't wanna put like one piece here and one piece here. You really wanna, you know, play around with the shape, but make sure that with your coil, you're filling everything in. So if you wanna go a little bit, you know, off and you don't wanna do the radial balance so much, you can start incorporating different shapes. One other popular shape is to go in and make some squiggles. And all I'm doing is taking this coil and I'm gonna make it fairly small, and you can make like some bigger parts, some smaller parts, but I wanna make sure that I'm really compressing this together. And I'm gonna make some shorter. You can make it all even if you wanted to. But I think I'm gonna kind of piece this together in a different way. We'll do something kind of interesting. Now, just like these little swirly coils, I wanna go in and I wanna smooth both edges where it attaches into the clay to create a nice seal. And be careful when you're lifting it off the table. But you wanna go in, you wanna smooth that really, really nice. You don't wanna have any clay crumbles in these, because we are gonna go in and we're gonna glaze these. And ceramics isn't very forgiving once it's fired. So you wanna make sure that you get everything really nice and smooth before you're ready to go in and fire it. So I'm gonna just play around with this and I'm gonna see kind of where it fits best. And I'm gonna then compress it in. And you can see how that lines up in my bowl. There's not a lot of space in between it. Now I'm gonna pick it up and I'm just gonna slip and score this little edge where it's going to attach to the rest of the clay. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to dip it in just a little tiny bit of slip. If you don't have slip, you can also use some water for this. And I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna really compress that shape into not only the clay that's already down, but also start pushing it into the bowl to get that form. And you want these to stick together before we go in and smooth them. And we're gonna wait till the very end to go in and smooth everything. So even if you only get to like doing part of your bowl, you are gonna wanna go in, cover it with damp paper towels, and make sure that you're working on it, you know, every day, every other day, and that you're checking on it as well. Now, besides swirls, another thing you could do is circles. Now, with my center circle, I don't want to have too much space in there. So I'm just gonna piece that together, get it super, super smooth. Go in with a tool or a paintbrush and kind of modify it a little bit. I'm just scraping out some of that extra clay, smoothing it up. All right, so that would be my first circle. I'm gonna then go ahead in and I'm gonna make my second one. And this is almost like how we go in and build a traditional coil pot. Except rather than building up, we're building around. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna line that up and I'm gonna cut it on a diagonal so that it lines up really nice. We'll go in, we will smooth this out all pretty. And like I said, you can do these completely symmetrical going outwards. I usually have students that kind of approach it that way, but I'm just gonna kind of play around with this to show you guys the different types of coils that you can implement. I'm going to attach one more circle to this, but you could just continue to attach a bunch more. And because these are thin coils, they do dry out a little bit quicker. So you wanna make sure that, you're not rolling out too big of pieces. And I also want you guys to be mindful with these that you're not using gigantic coils. You wanna use small coils and get really intricate little designs. This is gonna prep us for making detailed coils in some of our larger pottery to add details in. This semester, it is our Jomon pottery pieces. In, another place and time, it may be another project. Just go in, clean it up really nicely. And I usually pick the nicest side to face outward because that's the side that you're gonna see. And then I'm gonna play around with where I wanna put it. So you could see the difference between the circular piece and the swirls. So maybe I will try to implement it right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna slip and score. You could even, put some slip right on one of your tools and attach it that way. And I'm not only, once again, pushing it into the forms I already created, I'm pushing it down into the bowl form. And you wanna make sure that that's really compressed. And we're going in like that. So I'm starting to kind of build a variety of things going on. Sometimes it's nice to add some shapes in. So I've had a lot of students before go in and maybe add like a little small ball of clay in some parts. And I'm just kind of dipping the sides of these into some slip before I'm attaching them and pushing that down. Try to keep everything approximately at the same height so that we go ahead and smooth them in. It's not gonna be all wonky and crazy, different heights and everything like that. Now, I might just go in here and just do like a regular coil. So I'm gonna take a little bit more fresh clay, and that's just up close so you guys can kind of see what I got going on. And there are so many different types of coil shapes you can make. But you can be really, really geometric with these, really have a nice radial design. Say you start out with a swirl, then a second set of swirls, then a squiggle set, then a set of, circular pieces. Totally up to you what you want to do. So I'm gonna just go in with this coil piece, and because I'm just gonna kind of wrap it around as I feel like I want to, I am gonna go in and I'm just gonna add some little dots on here instead of scoring the whole entire thing, because I don't wanna see any heavy score marks in the bowl. And we'll just add like a little bit of slip on, a little bit of water, just teeny tiny bit. You don't wanna have too much because then it's gonna start showing through. So I'm gonna go in with my coil, and this first place I'm attaching it right here, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna smooth it right into that little swirly. And then I'm gonna kinda really push it in between these small pieces of clay. And I'm gonna wrap it around and make sure you're really compressing it into the forms that are pre-existing. And the idea is to have the least amount of space as possible in your bowl, because we don't want to have a lot of really large spaces to fill in with clay. If we do, it's gonna really kind of get in the way of the really nice designs that you're making, and you'll just kind of have these random blobs of clay sticking out, and they're not the prettiest. So I'm really just kind of following this along, shaping it as I go. And I'm gonna then break this off here, but I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna smooth it into the coil that's next to it. So it's all starting to formulate and become one thing. I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna apply a little bit of pressure, make sure that everything's really nice. If you wanna go in with a paintbrush and a little bit of water, you can. If you wanna just go in with your hand and smooth it up, you can as well. I'm gonna go grab a paintbrush really quickly. Sorry guys, I should have been mindful of this before I started, but I'm not gonna edit this out because Miss Clayton's making a lot of videos. So go in, you guys should all have a paintbrush at home, and you can go in, and you don't wanna, so much smooth your designs out, rather than just getting into like any of like the little cracked areas. And the inside of the bowl, we're gonna eventually add a bunch of clay in and bring it outward. And that'll be in the next video. I'll go ahead in, I'll finish this, and then I'll show you how we're gonna smooth it up in the end. So play around with different coil shapes. I might even consider, practicing before you just go ahead in and decide what you wanna do. Just gonna smooth that up. Now, by pushing this in, I have this little kind of fun shape going on here. So I might even go in and emulate that now into creating another coil piece. So I'm gonna adjust the size of my coils because that was pretty thin right there. And having like some thinner and then some little bit thicker coils can really add to your piece. In art, there's unity and there's variety. So our unity is gonna be working with the same shape, the same type of form, and our variety is gonna be working with different sizes. So I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna kind of use that pattern a few different times. And once I hit that coil, I'm gonna smooth it in. I'm gonna go in one more time, and I'm gonna utilize that pattern that I created by adding in those 3 pieces of clay. Smooth it up. Take your time on these. want to make sure that everything is really nice and connected. And when we go ahead and we pop these out of the forms, you're going to be able to see your whole entire design that you made. So say you're working on these, you get to about this stage and you're all ready to finish it. Grab some paper towel, damp paper towel, wring it out really well, cover your bowl with it, and then wrap it up in some plastic. When you are ready to come back to it, it should be really nice to work with still. If you are gonna go a few days where you're not working on your project, which essentially you really shouldn't because you should be working on these every few days, make sure that you are checking the damp paper towel so that the bowl's not gonna dry out on you. So by the next video, I will have this all filled in and finished, and we will go over smoothing.